constant arguments or these certain, we all have these toxic patterns. No one's immune. We all, and the signals of those are things like depression and anxiety, and those are simply telling you, hey, there's a pattern. It's either a trauma-based pattern or it's a toxic habit you've developed, but that pattern is actually putting your body under tremendous stress, even to the point where your DNA is affected. And I showed in my research that, if you think of the DNA ladder, if you pull out a chromosome, it looks like an X, and where you see my fingernails, pink fingernails, for those of you that are listening, the pink fingernails would then represent what we call telomeres. And telomeres are a proxy for how you are managing your mind. Very interesting.
Aren't they also based on how long you'll live as well? If the telomeres are longer?
Exactly. Yeah. Totally correct. This person's telomeres, when we looked at their DNA and we looked at their telomeres, they will tell you how the shorter they are, the weaker your cells, the shorter your lifespan, the more vulnerable you are to disease. Mm-hmm. So they were so that will show in terms of your biological age. So their telomeres were short and unhealthy. Their ages were in of this particular subject, and we had a group like this as well, that similar. Their chronological, the actual age was in their mid-30s, but their biological
like
age,
70 or something.
Yes, a sickly 70-year-old.
That's crazy.
Within 9 weeks of mind management. No, I don't use drugs. I do talk about diet and stuff, but in this particular clinical trial, it was pure mind management, just the neurocycle. Just get your mind under control. And that gray means that their brain stabilized, that the brain waves that they were actually managing. So here they were saying, I am depression, I am hopeless, all the biomarkers, DNA. Here they're saying, I now know why I feel depression. I'm not depression. I now know why. And depression is simply a signal of an underlying cause. It's not who I am. It's not it's not an illness. By 63 days, and these numbers are very significant, they were actually seeing behavior change in their life. They were saying, okay, so I know I'll still get depressed, but I know why and I know what to do. And there was changes in their behavior. They were back at work. They were back sleeping, 25% improvement in sleep. And all kinds of, like, their relationships, not suicidal anymore. And I can go on and on and on.
Wow.
So with mind management, in 9 weeks, we showed how you can literally change your telomeres, which are your markers for aging and for health, mental health and physical health. And that's pretty unusual because most of the work on telomeres has been done around diet and exercise, which are very
significant. It's all about leafy greens and plant-based.
Exactly, which is significant. And also there's been some work on meditation, but there's been no, I think this is the first study that's been done on actually doing deliberate, intentional mind work to change. And then we saw significant drops as well in inflammation markers and blood markers. But the biggest thing was their narrative, the person's story. So if we go away from the biology for a minute and we listen to the person's story, that person was offline, they were online, they were living again. And even though, and they had also had this acceptance, and this is what I wanted to kind of circle back to when we started, was life and managing your mind doesn't mean that it's going to be one big rosy, put on rose-tinted glasses. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. It is actually the ability to be okay and at peace with having moments of depression and actually looking for the message and seeing them as helpful. We have this really weird philosophy, which has been about 40 years in the West now, where we look at depression and anxiety and those kind of things as illnesses and neuropsychiatric brain diseases and as bad symptoms that we must suppress, like cancer symptoms you must suppress. So it's been lumped, or misery of life has been medicalized, to quote a brilliant psychiatrist, Joanna Moncrief. So we've got to really watch out for that. But actually, the real truth is that those depression and anxiety are not illnesses. They are just survival instincts. It's telling you, hey, pay attention. There's something going on. You need to go and unpack.
Something's not working. Something's not working. And it's manifesting as a pattern that needs to be addressed. And that'll block the greatness. So are you saying, did I hear you say that there isn't a mental health disease? It's more of just a pattern or something that we should be mindful of, but it's not an actual disease?
No, it's not a disease. And I know this counters the current philosophy, but if you look at the science, there's a large body of science. In fact, if you interpret all the science around this field and you really look at what's being tested, you actually will see it's not they've been looking for the neurobiological correlates. So they've been looking for where in the brain is depression. And for years we've been told about the serotonin imbalance causing depression. I mean, that's not even, it was a theory, never proven, great for marketing, for selling drugs, and also a simplistic way of telling someone, hey, you're depressed, don't worry, it's chemical imbalance, let me give you a drug to fix it. We want this quick fix mentality. So as medicine has advanced and technology has advanced, so we've become very caught up in the quick fix. But life's not like that. Mind is not like that. Mind is separate from brain and body. We all know that everyone's going on about the next pandemic is mental health. Mental health has always been an issue. Notice from the beginning of time, mankind has battled with life, with issues, with death, with fighting, with war, with whatever. So mental health's not on the rise, but the mismanagement of mental health, making it a disease, has created a whole new problem.
Wow.
So here we sit with, before the pandemic, they started doing a population study in the mid-90s, and this is when I was still early days of my practicing, sort of 10 years into my work, and I started seeing this trend of, and I was watching the study where people were, the decades-long trend of people living longer. So we know, we all hear this message. This is what we've heard. People are living longer because of the advances in medicine and technology. None of us question that. But something happened in 96 that did start questioning that. By the mid-2000s, it was an established, researched fact that we don't live longer anymore, that the trend of people living longer has actually reversed, and that we have a pandemic of deaths of despair, where people are dying from preventable lifestyle diseases, and the age group most being affected are between 24 and 65. So people at the beginning of their career and the prime of their career and through that age group are dropping down dead like flies, and it's considered deaths of despair by preventable lifestyle diseases. So we have to look at the lifestyle disease means that there's something in our body that's weaker. Why? Lifestyle, which is mind driven. How am I eating, drinking, sleeping? But more than that is, what's my mind behind all of that? How am I actually managing the day-to-day moments? How am I managing the patterns, the traumas, the established toxic habits? What am I doing about that stuff? And that's when we ignore all of that, because this current trend of science is saying, oh, those don't matter. What matters is the symptoms. Let's just look for the symptoms. Checklist, diagnose, label. When you label someone, you chop up to 10 years more of their life. It's like it's adding on. They've shown studies of people with a mental health diagnosis have chopped their up to 20 years off their lifespan. People on psychotropic drugs, because of all the complications and the changes in the brain and the body, chopping up to 25 years of their life. I mean, this is serious. So here we have this already existing, then the pandemic hits. Now another year, they say that there's an additional year being chopped off people's lives. But there's such a contradiction, because they're saying, hey, there's this adverse circumstance, grief of loss of people, uncertainty, medical, and not knowing if you're going to live or die, and how long is this isolation going to go on, and economic impact, and whatever, the whole lot. That's trauma, and they're saying that when they're saying, but this is the way to treat it. Let's label it, let's diagnose it, let's medicate it. So here we've come into COVID with a problem, with that stupid philosophy that's created such a lot of problems. And scientifically, this has all been researched and shown. And now we've got the pandemic, and now they want to carry on that system that didn't work to this, which is going to make it even worse. So we've got to shift our narrative completely, and we've got to stop saying that mental illness is on the rise, and that there's 1 in 4 people on antidepressants or depressed. 100% of people are depressed and anxious and concerned about this COVID pandemic. 100% of people in the world at some point in their life have and will be anxious and depressed and in grief and sadness and terror and despair and one of the others. A large percentage of the population, and I'm not sure of the exact percentage because no one's really done this kind of research, but estimates it's probably 30-40% of people will have extreme trauma from abuse, war trauma, that kind of stuff.
Is there such a thing as a chemical imbalance in some people? When they say, oh, I have a depression, it's a disease, or bipolar, or I have this mental health disease, or I have a chemical imbalance, I was treated with this, don't try to say I don't because this is who I am. Do some people have that, or is that...
That's a result of...
Go ahead.
The narrative of I have a chemical imbalance and my depression is from chemical imbalance is a narrative that is the only explanation that people are being given. They're not given an alternative reaction. An alternative narrative. So the most important thing is that anyone listening to this podcast, I want to validate your depression, your anxiety, your grief, your despair, your PTSD, whatever label you've been given. I want to validate that doesn't need to be validated with a disease label. You're not diseased. You're not a broken brain. Your brain isn't defective. You are going through something. So you aren't something, you aren't that, you are going through something.
You're experiencing something.
You're experiencing something, and you've coped in the only way that you could cope in that moment. So it created this adverse response because it was an adverse situation and you were just trying to cope. So what we have to do is go through a process of embracing and processing and reconceptualizing. So the important thing here is to recognize that chemical imbalance isn't the cause of your despair. The cause of your despair is what you've gone through.